Uh, Man, it was such a journey. I think it was about a 7-year journey from when I first felt that God was calling me into full-time ministry, um, as in working at church and as part of the church. For me, I was raised in the church and grown up in the church, so I've always, for me, loved being a part of things and loved being involved in ministries and loved serving God. And then, yeah, I guess I kind of felt and realized that that wasn't what everyone was like. I kind of just thought that everybody had the same passion um, for ministry and for the church that I did. And I began to realize not everyone was like that. And at the same time, I was talking to someone today about it as well, but there's just that feeling of dissatisfaction in your employment. And it's not a feeling of like, I've got a bad job or I'm going nowhere in my career. It's not that sort of thing. It's just like, it just doesn't satisfy you anymore. Whereas for some people, like career in the building industry or whatever industry, it really satisfies them and they kind of know they're there. For me, I knew like this doesn't satisfy me. And so I was working full time and started chopping and changing. I started doing a couple of days work at church and 3 days in the building industry and bits and pieces. And about over a 7-year journey of stops and starts. Finally, last year, and I think it was July, just made the decision to go into ministry full time at church at Every Nation Christchurch. Yeah, so yeah, it was a long journey. Looking back, I don't think I was ready 7 years prior. I think I may have become a casualty. But I knew last year, I knew that there was a moment in time to kind of seize the moment. And obviously it doesn't really make sense in the natural, in the flesh, leaving behind what was probably as good a job as I could get in my industry, working in management in a building company, driving around the ute, drinking coffee all day, cruising onto site and seeing the guys. It was a good job, but I didn't really hesitate. As soon as the opportunity became available to jump in full time, I knew that this was the right move. So yeah, it was a really long journey.
Yeah, well, that's something I really respect about you, Nathan. It sounds like what really drove that decision was a passion for Jesus, right? You had everything that the world would say would be successful. You had a good job, a bit cruisy even, and but you gave up I suppose financial comfort and stepped out of the comfort zone, I suppose, to become to go into ministry. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've never been too worried about finances. Like I know that the Lord will provide. It is like a worry, and I think everybody that goes into ministry weighs that up and considers it. I've just always had, and I've always seen the Lord provide so well for me, and He really has been so good throughout the years. And it is a weighing up, but yeah, when you get to the end of the day and you think, does building houses like really drive me and make me want to get out of bed, or does leading people to Jesus and helping them follow Him drive me?
Yeah.
And that's the answer to that was the latter.
Yeah.
So I knew I had to do something about it. And the longer I stayed in the kind of the building industry with like one foot in that door and one foot in ministry,
yes,
it kind of does at times feel like you're just treading water and you can't give your all to either one. So for me, yeah, making that transition, that step was about giving my all to ministry and just, I want to lead people to Jesus and help them to follow Him. That's really the goal, the aim.
That's awesome, Nathan. So sorry, we've been having some technical difficulties, and but I think we're all good now with our sound. Particularly, Nathan was fine, as is always the case. Nathan always sounds good, but it was me, and apparently we're back on track, which is good. And
that's great.
Yeah. So, and I was a little bit distracted, but I I suppose I want to get back to when I first met you. I think it was 10 years ago when I went to the 10th anniversary for Every Nation Christchurch. And I suppose maybe some of the people who are listening right now, they don't understand the connection between Every Nation Melbourne and Every Nation Christchurch. We shared the same senior pastor for 4 years,
We did,
Pastor Bernard,
yeah,
very loved here in Melbourne, and has a great fan base, but also family in terms of people who've sat under his ministry and under his leadership and greatly loved here. And but he was flying in, flying out, leading Every Nation Melbourne, while also leading in Christchurch. And I do remember 10 years ago when we went to the 10th anniversary, just how I suppose how blessed I was by what God was doing in Christchurch. It was a church that was growing, thriving, seeing people saved, disciples being made, God being honoured. Everything that we say in the Every Nation world: honour God, make disciples. It was happening there.
yeah.
And how's just give us a quick feedback on how the church is going at the moment, and dealing
Yeah,
with everything that the whole world's dealing with.
with COVID.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, church is going really well. Yeah, it's. I think it was about this time of April. Was it this week or next week? You're actually meant to be over here.
I was meant to be staying in your house, actually.
Yeah, you should be here. You should have been. All tucked up in bed by now, mate.
That's right.
In our house. But yeah, that was what we were gearing up for this year. 20-year celebration of Every Nation Christchurch, and it's a pretty young church still. 20 years is pretty fresh, considering some of the churches around the place that have been going for a while. But things are going so well. Disciples continue to be made. The team is growing. It's just a great church and a great place to be, and so many long-term connections, like the ministries that I'm involved with, and praise and worship, and there's guys that I've just been walking the road with for a long time, and so it's one thing I love about it. Sitting under Pastor Bernard and Colleen has just been fantastic. Just learnt so much, grown so much under them, and things are going well in the church. We've got Mika, who's the campus missionary, who Ken. She's doing great things on campus, and we're really, like everyone, I guess, we're gearing up for a good year ahead. 2020, we had our 20th anniversary celebration. It felt like I had a great holiday over January, got back in February, got all our programs up and running, people connecting again, really get into your groove and your rhythm for the year, and then this happens. And so it's definitely a really odd and weird year. But yeah, I think things have carried on as best we can online. In New Zealand, it's quite a strict lockdown. We're confined to our homes, our little bubbles that we're calling them. And we're allowed to go to the supermarket. That's about it. We're allowed to go for a walk around the block. But other than that, it's been myself and Kirsty and our 4 children in our house for the last 3 weeks. And it's meant to be ending on Thursday next week. But yeah, it sounds like they may lift it to a level 3, which means you stay in your bubble in your house, but you can now go and buy clothes and non-essential items. So yeah, we've really just been hunkered down for 3 or 4 weeks. We've been trying to figure out church online on the fly. We're just picking people's brains, various music and worship ministers in the Every Nation world, and just seeing what people are doing and trying to stay connected. Lots of Zoom calls. Obviously, that's a great way to connect. And yeah, while there's a lot of struggles, there's some huge positives as well, and some real benefits to this time. So I think we are able to reach more people online, but it is just such a different feel than being able to meet in person. So.
Yeah, I think that's how I feel. Like I'm looking forward to the opportunities that God's providing through doing church a different way. Same values, same principles, but the methodology being different.
Mm.
But at the same time, I do miss. I'm an introvert. I actually do like being by myself and being at home. But it's a bit hard to be an introvert with 4 kids at home. I'm not sure how you find it. I'm not actually. How would you
Yeah.
classify yourself as an introvert or an extrovert or an
I
ambivert?
I actually have no idea.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not strongly. I'm definitely not an extrovert, but I'm definitely not an introvert. So I'm somewhere in the middle,
You
like
might be what
with
they
most
call
things in my life.
you might be what they call an ambivert. You might be a bit of both type thing. And
Probably it just depends on the situation and who it is, but I definitely don't like being by myself for long periods of time, or it doesn't fill me.
yeah,
It's probably more, but then I'm not a classic extrovert either. So the jury's still out on that one, Ken. I'm sitting on the fence.
maybe you can work it out by the end of this interview or this discussion, this conversation.
Sounds good.
I was about to say also that I do miss, though, even though I am an introvert, I do miss catching up with people. I do miss going out for coffee, maybe going
Yeah,
out for a drink with someone, or popping into someone's house and just finding out how they're doing and saying hi to their kids and all that kind of stuff. And
yeah,
I think as
yeah,
human beings, we're definitely made to be social and to have healthy human contact and all that kind of stuff. But
yeah,
as you were talking, Nathan, you were saying that you had a great holiday this year, and I think I saw some photos on Facebook, and you guys had a great time unwinding, getting geared up for the year, and then this
yeah.
unexpected pandemic shutdown came. But Christchurch is no stranger to um, just a spanner being thrown in the works. Christchurch has had quite a few
Mm,
situations where it's like almost just overnight everything's changed, and and
yeah,
and in very different ways. The first being the earthquakes, I think around 2009, 2010, and then
yeah. 2011.
2011,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
last year, there was the tragedy of the mosque shooting in Christchurch. Um,
yeah.
Tell me, what's it like to live in Christchurch? Those are, those are significant tragedies that have taken place.
Mm,
How has God used those tragedies, if at all, and like to prepare you for now, and what has been going through, surviving those and learning how to deal with those? What's that equipped you with for this tragedy, so to speak?
yeah. Oh man, there's so much to speak on that. So I try and kind of just skim across a few different thoughts, but yeah, I think that even the earthquakes, that it has such a long-term effect on people. Um, like there will still be a shake every now and then, and it will really upset and affect people here in Christchurch. It just brings back so many memories, and it's kind of hard to describe, but you hear your house shaking, or you hear the rumble of the earthquake coming. It's just a small wee jolt, but it just brings everything flooding back.
Yes.
And it was just so weird for us to be living in and a part of something that you normally only see overseas. Like you normally only see buildings come crumbling down overseas, and it's something that happens like out there to other people.
Yes.
And for it to come in and affect us personally was just a really strange thing, albeit in a country that still looks after its people very well.
Yes.
So you have a major event like that here, and people are squabbling over like, does their driveway get replaced? Whereas overseas, people are losing, you know, people lose a lot of lives.
Yes.
So we're so similar to Australia, our culture. So it's very easy to relate. But yeah, it was just such a weird time of destruction and loss, of some people just truly practically being so affected, like without a home, um, nowhere to stay, those sort of things, no running water,
Yes.
no toilets,
Yeah.
all those sort of practical things. As a Christian, it really drives you to God, and um, I'm not I guess I'm not thankful for those things, but I do appreciate the way that they continually drive you back to God.
Yes.
We live in such blessed times in New Zealand and Australia, especially. Just this peace and security and prosperity everywhere you go in our nations. When you compare it to history, and these things, they drive us back to God.
Yeah.
And so our culture is tough to share the gospel. It's a culture that is very self-sufficient, no need for God, anything like that. So these events, they really give opportunity and an atmosphere to share the gospel with people, to love people, and just for myself personally, just to be driven back to God in a really powerful way. And I remember the mosque shooting was just such a shock. I mean, that happens over there, elsewhere. That happens overseas and in unstable countries, not in our country. And so, I remember after that happened, just feeling our house. It kind of has a wee bit of a view over a part of the city.
Okay.
And I was just sitting there that night and felt really, really heavy, really burdened. It just felt like darkness, and it felt like fear had just gripped the city.
Yes.
Because of what had happened. And so I remember that night, I just did some worship, just did some live worship on Facebook. And immediately it changes the atmosphere.
Yes.
And immediately as you turn to God and as you just seek his face and just worship him and give him glory, then it changes atmosphere. So a lot of the focus for us after the mosque shootings was changing atmospheres.
Yes.
Focused on loving our neighbor. And so we had some church initiatives on how to love our community, just how to love schools and police stations and hospital staff that have been affected by the tragedy.
Yes.
We're learning how to love our neighbor again. But again, it's as so often happens in our sort of cultures. It's big for 2 weeks or so or a month, and then it gets forgotten, and people just go back to their ordinary lives. And so, yeah, that's our culture here. There's a moment of, I guess, an opportunity to sow seeds and to share the gospel and that, but it's still a very politically correct culture, so you can only go so far. But then people do tend to forget that we just went through a tragedy like that. So, yeah, for me personally, those things drive me back to God in a big way.
Yes.
For our country, it shakes us definitely.
Yeah.
And so will this as well. It's pulled down idols and gods that we have. Entertainment and sport. So much sport that we usually consume as a country is not on anymore. For me, that idol came crashing down earlier this year, with cricket, especially when the Black Caps absolutely failed dismally in Australia.
Yes.
And just got thrashed. So that idol of sport came crashing down for me.
Yes.
A couple of months ago. But yeah, it's just interesting to see the culture in the country at the moment just trying to deal with this lockdown.
It's interesting, your reflections on those two tragedies, both really painful in their own way, but it is interesting what you talked about regarding the atmosphere of fear from the mosque shooting, which was very much a human, like one man, one angry, deranged man with an evil worldview, who how much humans can change the atmosphere in for good or for bad, right? And then your response to that as a worshipper, as a church leader, was to worship. And I've been actually really blessed to watch your worship from home. I think it's from home. I believe it's from home. Hopefully it's from home, and so you don't get fined and get in trouble for breaking the lockdown. But I've been really blessed by that. And how have you found as a worship leader, as a musician, worshiping to a screens, for instance? How has that been for you? How's that been for people? What kind of feedback have you got from that?
mean, by far the biggest challenge for me has been the lack of a team around me. I really, the way that I like to do things and work is as part of a team. So for me, just to be doing things on my own, I really struggle with that. I love to bounce off other people's flow and giftings, and just the other worship leaders that we have and musicians. I really do rely on them and bounce off them a lot of the times, and just flow together. So I really miss that and struggle with that. But on the same time, realizing that I'm a leader, I'm a pastor.
Yes.
There's a flock to take care of, and worship is such a good way of reminding us again, like, who is in control, who God is, what He's done for us, His promises, just His goodness, His faithfulness. And so you have to put aside some of your own reservations and just do it, and just lead and just do something. And for me, it's hard to lead in front of a screen. I love the congregation. I love that whole picture of, you're leading worship, but you're really just, almost imagine yourself leading with your back to the congregation. You're facing the same way.
Yes.
You're just leading them towards the King.
Yes.
And there's such power in hearing the voices around you, and just seeing people pressing in themselves, and you just feel faith rising.
Yes.
And so without that in the room, it's really different. I feel it's probably most freest when it'd just be like my guitar in front of an iPhone.
Yes.
Not worrying about any technical things or sound or anything like that. But on the same time, if people are going to listen, I want them to have something kind of decent to listen to.
Oh, yes, that's right.
So I've been trying to work hard on a happy medium of being live, but also sounding okay as well. So
that's right. I'm just thinking about even tonight's interview, having the sound issues at the beginning, and how that can be, obviously off-putting, right? And maybe who maybe tuned in to listen and thought, oh, this is not going to work, I've got something better to do. But but maybe if they had stuck it out, they would have got that gem from you. But I wonder, is there an element of going back to, stripping away the performance side of things? That is that something that you've had to deal with? There's a lot of tensions in Christianity. Or like human responsibility or God's sovereignty, or do we? How much do we attract people to the church? How much do we go out and connect with people? And amongst other things, I suppose one of them would be excellence and going too far, and then getting a performance mentality, or then simplicity and purity of just it's just me and you, God. But maybe we don't have to have all the bells and whistles. Then I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Because I can imagine if it's just you and your iPhone and your guitar, you can almost forget that the iPhone's there, and it can
exactly.
just be you and God. And then when it's just you and God, you're just pressing in, and people are being drawn to the God you're worshiping, because they can see that you're worshiping Him. You're not worried about anything else. Of course, we have to have some level of the sound's got to sound right as well. I mean, I get that, but what are your thoughts on that stuff? I mean, all I'm saying is, I suppose to sum up what I'm saying, that there must be some kind of something powerful about stripping it back as well, perhaps. In the 90s or in the early 2000s, there was a whole MTV Unplugged thing. It's kind of like the whole church is being unplugged. I mean, what do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I guess for me as a musician, when I can go to a place, when I can be led in worship, and just the sound is good, and the word I use is secure. Like, the sound is secure.
Yes.
Because you are being led, right? Even if you're in another situation, you're a worshiper, you're going to worship anyway.
Yes.
But when things are secure, I think you can really um, yourself become vulnerable. And when things aren't secure, like when they're a bit vulnerable, then you yourself are more guarded.
Yes.
So I think sometimes as the leader, like you got to make people feel secure.
Yes.
And so one way you can do that is through the sound. And if the sound is strong and secure, if you're playing the right chords, if
Yeah.
your voice is just average to acceptable, um, then I think people feel secure, and then
Yes.
they can be vulnerable, and
Yes.
you're really leading people there.
Yes.
I've just often found in my experience when I'm being led by someone or something that's not so secure, then it's hard for me
Sure.
to go there as mature as I try to be,
Sure.
and working
Yeah.
my way through it.
Yes.
And I think you can have both. You can be
Yep.
vulnerable and authentic, and still sound good.
Yes.
And just trying to work on it, just trying to see what I can do, see what sort of chat to people that are doing stuff that sounds great but is
Yes.
authentic, and
Yeah.
just learning. This whole thing's been a learning process.
Yes. Well, I think that's what I remember about you, and what I've been impressed by you in the past, Nathan, is um, your heart is right and you're a worshiper, but at the same time you've connected that to a desire to improve professionally almost. Because I remember you were taking like singing lessons, and then you're doing gigs in different like restaurants or bars just to get the practice, get the hours up, so to speak. And
Yeah,
I think there's something to be said about simplicity and stripping away all the bells and whistles on the one hand, but sometimes I suppose that the temptation would be then to just say, "Oh, God loves a cheerful noise," so
yeah,
I can just be
yeah,
happy with the noise without
yeah.
necessarily honing the gift that's been given to me, and to polish the crown before I throw it at Jesus' feet, rather than just
Mm.
turfing it at him, so to speak. But I don't know. What do you? Any thoughts
That's
on that?
that's a great thought. Just the gifts that you are given, are you just lazy with them, or do you work hard on them? Um, yeah, that's spot on there, man. And yeah, I did. I took a year off building at one stage, and went to music school and just worked as hard as I could on my voice and my musicality and that sort of thing. And I've never been particularly gifted, but just always tried to make the most of everything I've been given. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's a challenge for all of us, no matter what gifting it is, what we've been given. Do we work on it? Do we work hard on it to craft it? Just to, it's been given to us. So what are we going to do with it? I
Sure.
love your line of thinking there.
Just maybe to switch it up a tiny bit. Are you familiar with the concept of the worship wars?
I haven't heard that, mate.
Okay, so I just found it interesting that because as I was watching your live stream of your worship from your home, which was awesome, loved it, totally ministered to me. Bit of a country kind of rock feel to begin with, which I kind of resonated with,
Yeah,
and and I you also but then you played a hymn as well. How great thou art, which is powerful. Did you grow up with singing hymns and choruses before Hillsong came and changed the whole worship landscape?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I grew up in a Baptist church, um, so organ and piano and that sort of thing. Played in the youth band in the Sunday morning service once, and people walked out
Okay.
because drums are of the devil. So yeah, grew up in that sort of scene, absolutely. And yeah, yeah,
Because
it was
I
interesting
suppose
times. Yeah,
that's an interesting example of the worship wars. On the one hand, you've got people that
yeah,
kind of they really lament and attack even the contemporary Christian worship movement, that it's celebritized, it's monetized, it's very performance based, and they point back to hymns as more theologically sound and more holy, and then you've got other people who point at the hymns and say they're out of date and irrelevant, and no one's. It's not. It's just going to perpetuate an image of an out of date Christianity. And there's this big battle, and I suppose for
Yeah.
me, what I am concerned about is why are we fighting? Why are we spending this energy
Yeah.
on attacking each other when we could be preaching the gospel or doing whatever else and just accept that people are going to have different tastes, and maybe modern
Yeah.
Christian worship isn't as theologically sound as some of the old hymns, perhaps. But I don't know. What's your take on different Christian styles of worship? Another battle is between like in Australia, Australian kind of music is very more rock orientated, but then you have different segments of the population that are more of a gospel feel or R&B feel, and and then everyone has their own
Mm.
their favorite songs, and so it's not just hymns versus contemporary Christian worship, or it's different genres. How do you
Yeah.
feel about as a worship leader, regarding when some people might react to you and say, "Hey, that song that you played, the theology is all wrong," or um, you know,
Mm-mm.
go ahead, go.
Yeah. Lots to say on it. But what do I choose to say? I definitely not just with worship, with most things in Christianity. I go down the line of why are you fighting with each other about it?
Yep.
There's much more important things to be doing with your time. I know, people set up whole ministries devoted to trying to catch people in heresy, and popular movements all over the world. They're trying to grab sound bites to catch people and prove them wrong and all this sort of stuff. That takes a lot of time to do that. I know it does. And efforts are far better put in other places. With worship, I just think you can't force one style on people. And it's just beautiful that we have so many options. Like you could have a church that just loves to do the old hymns and maybe put a bit of modern music to it and sing that, and they're worshiping God, and it's fantastic. And then you have another church down the road that only sings their own songs, like new songs.
Yes.
And then you can have another church that just is loving what Elevation are doing, or what Bethel are doing, and just only sings theirs. And you can have that freedom within the body. I don't think there's a one size fits all. But I think as a worshiper, I think the most important thing is that your congregation enjoys and identifies with the style, musically and lyrically, of the worship. For example, if you're in a small town, New Zealand, you definitely want to go more rock style than gospel style. It'll just identify with the people. They'll feel comfortable with that music, and that sort of thing. For us here in Christchurch, we have different tastes. We have 5 worship leaders, and we all have very different tastes in what we like to worship to.
Yes.
So there's a freedom with us as well to bring our own. We all bring our own kind of sound.
Yep.
Because we're an Every Nation church, we do have a lot of nations and a lot of different cultures.
Yes.
So it's like we can do that in our services because we can do gospel and rock and Hillsong, and we can just mix it up because we have a mixed congregation.
Yes.
But you just have to be sensitive to what your congregation is connecting with. If they're not connecting with something, then you probably shouldn't really be doing it. And it's the same with, if we relate it to a time in lockdown, it just wouldn't make sense if we're all sitting in our lounges to kind of be watching a song that's led in front of thousands, or a song that works really well in a conference or a concert.
Yes.
We've got to be worshiping songs that are just, doesn't matter if it's just you on a guitar.
Yes.
Or you've got a 20-piece band. Some songs just fit and just work.
Yeah.
And I also think now there's a real big swing back to songs that I guess people would say are more theologically interesting, accurate, a lot more wordsmiths writing songs. I think definitely maybe 10 years ago, there was just a lot of songs where, the chorus might have been one word or things like that. But now I think there's some beautiful songs coming out, and people are just getting, I'm loving the lyrics that are coming out, and just poetic and interesting and challenging and thought-provoking.
Can I ask you about
scriptural.
one lyric in particular? Sorry to cut you off, Nathan, but the sloppy wet kiss line. What did you think? What are your thoughts?
Yeah,
heaven meets earth like a sloppy wet kiss.
Normally get someone else to lead that verse.
Yep.
I love the chorus of that.
It's actually a great song. It's just that line seemed to cause a lot of people like, I don't know if I tend to default to, I just want to worship Jesus, and if this is, I just want to do it, and but I did love what you were saying, that it's beautiful. You're saying that in Every Nation Christchurch, it's beautiful that you have so many options. You have different leaders of different styles, and that diversity is a real asset and an incredible, I suppose, even testimony, right? Often music defines differences in our community, in our wider community, and music kind of reinforces boundaries. Certain people, punk rockers are punk rockers, and they're not going to hang out with the hip hop guys, right? If they are, they're going to beat each other up. But in the church, we have that freedom and capacity to use different styles, and that can be and to serve each other. I think what I hear you saying when you're talking about if the music isn't connecting, it's not like leadership is service, right? And so we're serving our congregations in terms of what we're preaching and the music that we're playing, and ultimately that diversity honors God, because He's the creator, right? He invented diversity, and I don't think there's one style. Sorry, go ahead.
It's part and parcel of being an Every Nation movement. It's that's who we are. We're multicultural. We don't reach out to one ethnicity. We reach out to all. We have the nations in our churches. That's just who we are. And so I think our worship and our singing and our praise, it needs to reflect that.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to find one sound that reflects that. But that's who we are.
Well, guys, we'll be wrapping up shortly. So if you have any questions, once again, sorry for the technical difficulties at the beginning of our interview today. But if you have any questions for Pastor Nathan, then it could be about anything. Could it be about the model of fridge that he has in his kitchen? Or if you have a building question, then I'm sure he'd be able to give you some free advice. Any questions about dealing with adversity or worship or being a leader in New Zealand, then feel free to put them in the chat. That would be great. But also, I suppose maybe I wanted to ask you just really quickly. We both have 4 children. I'm just wondering, Nathan, how have you found it being in like total lockdown? Like even I think we're at stage 3 here in Melbourne. You guys are in stage 4 in Christchurch. How have you found it with 4 kids, being a parent of 4 young kids? Your kids are younger than mine. How have you found that?
Yeah, so my eldest is 9. My youngest is about 18 months. Eldest is a girl, and I've got 3 boys. So I think generally as a family, the first 2 weeks were pretty good. I think it was a novelty for everybody, and obviously life and ministry, as you'd know, Ken, is busy, and so you can be away from home a lot. And I think it was just nice to have 2 weeks chilling at home. But I think definitely last week and this week, really see the kids starting to get a bit over this situation. But it really it made life super busy for our family. So for me and Kirsty especially, because suddenly the kids around us 24/7. Kirsty normally has some downtime during the day when kids are at school or at kindergarten, things like that. So for her, it's just made life for her very busy. Kids still pretty young, they're pretty demanding.
Yes.
So it can be pretty tough. I'm normally pretty strict on my work. Like I've got a wee office in our bedroom that I kind of go to and hide away in. And so Kirsty does a lot with the kids. But it has been great. Lots of bouncing on the tramp, heaps of that. Lots of wrestling and fighting, and just lots of bike rides around the block.
Yes.
But yeah, kids are, well, my kids at the age they're at, they're very demanding. So
Yes.
I think it's been the biggest challenge.
Yes.
But we're always just trying to remain thankful because we're in lockdown level 4, but we're still, we're so blessed. We're in an amazing country. We've got food is just readily available. There's no supply problems. We've got each other. We've got family.
Yes.
We're so much better off than a lot of people. So
absolutely.
just trying to keep thankful and just keep our eyes focused on what God is doing as well. It's been great to grow closer together as a family and have time for devotions and for God chats and things like that.
Okay, got a great question here from J.E. Joe, and they ask, how do you lead worship if you're feeling distant from God? Do you ever feel a resistance to lead worship, or do you just fake it till you make it? Have you ever been in that situation where the last thing you want to do is actually get up there on stage and tell everyone, okay, guys, let's press into God, because that's the last thing you want to do? Have you ever been there?
Yes, all the time.
All the time? Are you sure you should be a worship? Are you sure you should be a worship pastor if it's all the time?
No, it's definitely know what that's like. For a long time I was building and serving at church in this role as well. So it's not always easy when you leave home at 7 a.m. and it's dark and it's -2, and you get home at 5:30 and it's dark and 0 degrees, and then you got to shoot out to worship practice or things like that. Like, let's be honest, life is pretty tough at times, and then you got to pick yourself up and lead worship, and we all fall short, we all sin, we all have times where we're feeling distant from God. But I think the thing with worship is that it's a reminder for yourself as well.
Yes.
When you sing songs, when you begin just to worship, and you begin just to realize that God isn't putting barriers on you.
Yes.
We're doing that to ourselves. We're telling ourselves that we can't draw near. Whereas in his word it says, in James, draw near to God and he'll draw near to you. And so it's good. As soon as we start worshiping, it's like a reminder. This is who God is. When we sing of his faithfulness or his goodness, it's a reminder. I don't think it's a healthy place to always be like that, but it is definitely part and parcel of it. I know the same for you, Ken, that you'd be lying if you said that every time you went up to preach, you're feeling like $1 million and everything's fine at home and all that sort of stuff. There's challenges and obstacles that we all face, but my encouragement is just to keep going, and just to allow the practically, if you're going to lead worship at church at 10, when you arrive or in the car on the way, just begin to lead yourself, to minister to yourself, to sing songs. I think one thing as a leader you've got to learn to do is to be able to lead yourself.
Yes.
And so part of that is when you're feeling like a lot of your church will be feeling that they'll be feeling distant from God.
Yes.
They'll be feeling not worthy to come and worship him. And so if you've been there, then it can give you a lot of insight into the congregation as well. So,
I think one of the key words in that question was, do you ever feel a resistance to lead worship? And I think that there's always a resistance to worship. There's always a resistance to be who God's called us to be. And sometimes that resistance is really tough. But if we can break through using like some of the principles you've been talking about, then it's like doing weight training, right? We're building a muscle, and we can actually get stronger. And sometimes that resistance, maybe the enemy's meant it for evil, but God's going to use it to turn around, to make us to grow and mature, and to be able to break through barriers that maybe like break through to much easier and more easily than we have in the past. What do you think of the phrase "fake it till you make it"? Have you ever would you use that phrase? Have you done that where it's like you haven't really felt it, but you kind of started off like with like being energetic and to like being energetic when you didn't feel energetic, being passionate when you didn't feel passionate, but then you kind of caught up to that internally. You caught up to what you were putting on or portraying externally.
I'm trying to rapidly get my thoughts together. I don't know if I'd use the words "fake it till I make it," but I understand what's being said there, and I think we are actually called to do that, because we're called to worship in spirit and in truth, right? And so, in truth is not holding anything back, and I think sometimes in truth it can be like saying, "Lord, I actually do not feel like giving you praise, but I'm going to do it anyway because you've called me to do that and you've asked me to do that."
Yep.
And I think there's aspects of like of pushing through something, of kind of just saying, "This is what your word says, Lord. I'm standing on this." You're telling me to praise you at all times. You're telling me to sing a new song. You're telling me that you're faithful and you're wanting me to sing those things. And I really don't feel it, but that's what I'm going to do and worship out of obedience. And I guess it's the idea of a sacrifice of praise too.
Yes.
And if something was easy, was it of any value?
Yes.
But if things are hard and you don't want to do it, but you follow through anyway and you do it out of obedience.
Yes.
And because you know it's going to be good for you.
Yeah.
Sometimes out of that sacrifice and something beautiful can happen. And I just always known that I've got nothing really to offer apart from the Lord. Yeah. And so for me, it's just a go-to.
Yeah.
No matter what's going on,
yeah,
you just got to come and worship. You just got to come and spend time with God and be in His presence and be refreshed and be filled again and be emboldened and those sort of things. So that's the only thing I know to do is to go to God.
Sure.
I know we're pretty much useless on our own. So that's a good place to go.
Absolutely. Well, I think that makes you incredibly powerful as a leader, Nathan, to know that it's actually it's God that you're offering, right? And sometimes when we think we're the answer, then that's when we get in the way of the true answer, Jesus. Just got a comment here from Marion. She says that she believes, that there's an extraordinary wisdom and grace in denying yourself to still try and lead worship despite not feeling like it. Yeah, I think that's. Thank you, Marion, for that comment. That idea of God meets us there with grace when we press in. We're not meant to overcome the resistance that we feel in our own strength. We're never meant to really do anything in our own strength. But as we take those stumbling steps to overcome the resistance that we feel, there is grace that comes to help us to press in and to overcome.
Yeah, it's so good. And even when we go back to the night of the shootings last year, when I said there was fear and hate just in the atmosphere over the city.
Yes.
And it's sort of a choice you make. Do you just like sit in that and like watch the news and just keep sitting under that, or do you make a decision to get out from that? And so it wasn't. It was only at the end of that worship that I felt that was gone. It wasn't before I worshiped. It was after I did that. So.
Yeah. Worship, especially when it comes to singing and music, is a very active activity, right? It definitely it does change the atmosphere, as you were mentioning earlier on tonight.
Yeah.
Well,
I think the enemy wants to steal our song.
Yes. Okay.
So what worship does is it gives us back our song.
Yep.
And I think that's so often in life the enemy wants to take our song, steal our joy. And so I think worship, it gives us back our song.
Yes.
It puts a song in our heart, a song in our lips.
I really like that.
Really
you probably know this as a worship leader, but maybe some of our people who are tuning in tonight don't know. But all human to human speech in the Bible before the fall was song. So the only communication between humans before we rebelled against God, as it's recorded in Genesis, is song. And I mean, there's not a lot of it, to be fair, but all of it that is there, all of it that is recorded, is song. It's
Wow, I
basically
didn't know that.
it's basically when Adam sees Eve, he breaks into song. This is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she came out of the side of man. And that's Hebrew poetry. It's song. It's like a psalm.
Is that a song idea, Ken? Is that maybe a new song coming on?
It seems like Adam was the first boy band singer or kind of crooner.
Yeah.
Could have been.
It could be a collaboration between Every Nation Melbourne and Every Nation Christchurch.
Well, I can play bass.
Okay.
There you go.
Come on, man.
I can't play it well. Yes. Well, if anyone has any other questions, okay, let's just see. We have another comment here from J.E. Joe. When I think fake it till you make it, I think of those worship leaders who have completely denounced their faith. What do you think about that? There's been some celebrated cases. I don't know if you know, like for instance, a famous worship leader here in Australia was kind of saying, I'm no longer a Christian anymore. Maybe he was faking it and he kept on faking it and never actually got to the make it stage. What do you think about that? Any comments on that or?
Not too many, because I've never been in a situation, and it's so different here in New Zealand. We don't have mega churches or celebrity worship leaders. I don't think there's one worship leader or anything like that everyone in the nation would know. So we just don't have that scene. So it's really hard for me to make a comment on it. But it is sad, but I just see so many guys get it right. And there's the guys that get it wrong. But then I just see, man, that the Lord's got his hand on some anointed worship leaders and songwriters. I guess, it's really hard for me to comment because I'm not in that scene at all. I've never ever attended a mega church or been to one, or I don't know what goes on inside those churches. Whether it becomes a job, not sure.
Okay, well, maybe you'll be the first celebrity worship pastor in New Zealand. Who knows? And not that you'll be looking for it, but maybe it will land in your lap. I'm not sure. But as we're going to be wrapping up now, I'm just going to do a bit of a speed round of questions with Nathan. And if you guys have any other questions, then send them through. Maybe we can use them for a follow-up conversation at some point. I've had a lot of fun tonight, Nathan. I hope you have too. And notwithstanding our technical difficulties, but I do have some speed round questions. These are a little bit less serious, and not meant to go into too much depth with them or think too much about them. There's no real right or wrong answers. But let me just, I suppose I'll give you a bit of a taste of what they're like by asking this first one. Who's your favourite cricketer and why is it Shane Warne?
Yeah. Oh, wow. So many memories of Shane Warne. He got out on 99, didn't he, against New Zealand? My favourite cricketer is actually Shane Bond, Ken.
Okay. Shane Bond.
Terrific fast bowler.
A Kiwi. There was, who was the other guy? It was quite, I can't remember. Was it Craig? I don't know.
What did he do?
My knowledge of New Zealand cricketers isn't that great. There's Sir Richard Hadley. There's Shane Bond, because you've just mentioned him. But there was Chris Cairns. Is it Chris Cairns?
Oh, yeah.
He was all right. He was not bad.
He was not bad, yeah.
What level?
I mean, New Zealand cricket players are a bit like Australian rugby players, eh? It's just not worth mentioning, eh?
Fair enough. What did you play representative cricket at all?
No. Just below, like, so we have Canterbury, and then we have zones before that. So about 6 zones.
Yep.
So just below that, didn't quite make it into that.
Okay. I think we call that sub-district.
It's an average player.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's still pretty good. What superpower would you like to have if you could have one? Just one.
I'd love to be able to fly.
Okay, that's the second time. Out of 2 episodes, we've had 2 people say they would like to be able to fly. So you can talk to Pastor Edre about what you would do. Maybe you could fly together, perhaps.
Will do.
Meet up
Will
halfway.
do. I'll go and see him.
Meet
Yeah.
up halfway between the Philippines and New Zealand. Gospel or rock?
I'm going to go gospel tonight, Ken.
Yeah, all right. Excellent. Nice. Favorite gospel singer then?
What's his name? William McDowell.
Okay, William McDowell. Sounds like a guy who wrote an apologetics book, but probably not.
Okay. Probably a different guy. Yeah.
Well, Josh McDowell, but he sounds the same surname.
Oh, that guy.
What's your favorite ice cream flavor?
That's boysenberry.
Boysenberry. Okay. One of the best gelatis I've ever had. The flavor was in Auckland, so not Christchurch, but and it was I think it was like amaretto or something, but it was cherry based with some. It was incredible. I suppose boysenberry wouldn't be too far off it. Mountains or beach?
Beach.
Okay, a beach. You're a swimmer, a water baby. You like fishing. Is that why, or you like the sand?
There's just I don't know. It's just close. It's just 5 minutes away.
You like the convenience. Okay, got you.
Yeah. It's just nice. Warm weather's always nice.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. All right. What's on your playlist at the moment?
I've got We the Kingdom cranking, Ren Collective.
Very
elevation stuff.
Very hipster. I see that you're wearing a flannelette top. Are you, and you're growing a bit of a beard? Are you moving into a hipster phase?
I think this is a COVID cut for the facial hair and the haircut. It's just a COVID-19 cut.
Got you.
But flannel's nice and comfortable. Hey, Corey Asbury playing a lot of his stuff and elevation.
Yep. What let's go beyond the Christian worship bubble to the wider music scene. What are you listening to there?
Tell you what, if I pulled out my phone, I probably don't have too many on there. Ever since there's nothing much on there.
Okay,
actually.
Fair enough.
To tell you the truth, I'm just trying to rattle through what's on there.
Okay, no.
Because I built my house 2 years ago, so I had plenty of music then. Do you know what, Ken? I think the last secular album that was on my playlist was Tina Turner, Best Of. There we go.
So we would have had a bit of Simply the Best, Nutbush.
Simply the Best, yeah.
Simply the Best. That's a great way to wrap up tonight, because I think Nathan, you are simply the best, and we've gone for an hour, and but I've had a lot of fun, and I hope that you have too, and I've really been impressed with just your wisdom and the experiences that you've been through, and so thank you so much for providing some insight and wisdom, perspective beyond our own, and I really appreciate that. And
thanks, Ken, and thanks so much for having me on, man. It was great to chat to you.
Awesome. Well, let's wrap it up there. So actually, for those who are listening in, our next Meta is on Wednesday the 22nd, and we at 7 p.m. Melbourne time, and we are going to be having as our guest Mark DeLeet. Mark is a campus missionary from Every Nation Brisbane. He looks like Jesus, and I think he even thinks a bit like Jesus. So it'll be interesting to have him next week. But that's it from me. Thanks so much for joining Pastor Nathan McGowan from Every Nation Christchurch and myself for our second episode of Meta, Conversations to provide wisdom, perspective, insight, hope, and courage beyond ourselves. We hope that you've been encouraged. That's all from me. And as always, be blessed.